Do you know where that old strange curse that sometimes said to haunt the most respectable of relics comes from? That the curse of the mummies. Would it surprise you to know? But the story is as old as ancient Egypt. Here it is. The purification. The evocation. Yes. Would you like to hear the story as I remember it? If not, as I translate it. The story comes from the days of Ramesses III, an emperor far distant from ancient days, almost perhaps equidistant with our time from the founding of the First Kingdom. Be that as it was, in his days, the sea people conquered the northern delta and desecrated the tombs, the old tombs that lay to the south. And in the southern kingdom, rumours spread that up there in the old city of Memphis, some strange presence grew. The sun grew yellow and yellower yet, and men's skins shone by day, and at night they sweated in the moonlight. And there was unquiet spirits wandering the land. Most in the remains of the city that was built by the heretic, here it is, by the great heretic Pharaoh. There, one by one, men grew sick of some brown fever and died. While Ramesses III called his great priest, Khoso, and Khoso listened, longed to the traveller tales, and then looked at the light and shivered. And he said, I shall send my steward, a man well crafted in dreams. And although the steward was unwilling to go, in a small boat he crept north. Now the sea peoples meant that he had to be careful. What one lone man may enter domains that a pharaoh or even a high priest of Ammon can't. And so it was at last. The steward came to an inn, I suppose we might call it, in the western oasis where the old city had once been. And the inn was almost desolate. Just an old innkeeper who looked sadly on and said, it's gone. All that dream I had is gone. For it walks in the night. It walks in the night. And when the steward said that he meant to lie that night at the inn, the old man unbuttoned his shirt and showed him. There he wore a special necklace dedicated to Set, guaranteed to protect against dark magic. And when the steward saw that, he shivered, for that was a charm beyond a charm, a mystery he could not follow. And he stretched out on the leather-thonged bed and drifted into something akin to sleep. And in the middle of the night it came, a whisper from some old, dead, unquiet spirit, and it said, I wander, I wander, I wander as men plunder. For what was once settled is broken, and until it is made right, I will take men with me to that domain in which I am now damned and held as naught. And he saw then a great burnt plain, and in that burnt plain upon the other side there was a figure that at first he thought was a man, and then he wondered, for it was slight, he thought it might have been a woman. But at last he realized it was a skeleton, covered in old funeral raiments, and around it there was nothing, no great gifts, only emptiness. And he felt the chill, the unquiet spirits in the fields of a serious field. And they are held at naught, given nothing by their relatives, nothing by their friends, and so cursed must come back to the world. And he shivered, and he forced himself out of the dream, and he turned to the landlord, but the landlord had died in the meantime. And he looked out the window, and there was the cold, hard moon, shining bright. And without thinking what he was doing, he climbed in his boat, and fearing not crocodiles or the snakes that dwell in the night, he made his way up the Nile back to Thebes. And there he told the priest what he had seen. And the priest took him to that very chamber of Ammon, in whose presence is known the great old god of the sun. And there the priest muttered and chanted, Kusu, Kusu, Ammon, muttered. And suddenly he held up his arms, and then he clapped them twice. And his steward, eyes black, stood up and said, Alone I am in all the world. Alone, I who am exiled. And as I am thrown out of death's dark kingdom, so I shall bring men to death. And the steward stretched out his hand, and it was like the skin had given way to bone, and the hand moved towards the priest. Ice cold it was, but the priest stood up defiant, and he struck his great staff down upon the ground and said, Nay, tell me what you are, God or evil spirit. And the steward, who was the ghost, said, Have I not told you? I once dwelt in splendour in the north, but my tomb is despoiled, my property gone, and I am forced into exile after millennia. Where were you buried? I do not wish you to go there, for fear you burn at last even my bones. I tell you, I do not wish to go back to Death's kingdom, but I will have my revenge. The priest again struck the ground and said, No! Upon the soul of Ammon, upon the blood of Osiris, know that you wish to return. Do not confuse despair with desire. And the creature took a step back, and its eyes grew dusty, as if it cried ashen tears. But its fingernails were still long, as the dead unkempt are, and it said, "I will not tell. I cannot tell." And again Kusu looked at it, but this time he grew angry, and he said, "Tell, upon the faith of Isis." Now when Kusu swore that holiest of oaths, which bind the dead with the living in the holy bond, the steward's tongue unfroze. "I am by the heretic city, where the sea people came last year. They took the spoils of my tomb to their ships. "How lie those ships?" said the priest. "They lie in the east, caught by the wind. I hear the wind. They cannot escape." And when he heard that, the great priest smiled, and he brought his hand down again, and the steward fell out, as if one in a stupor, and he had the steward laid upon a bed, and then he went before Ramesses and said, "Sire, gather up your army, and I will go to you, for I know where our enemy lies." And Ramesses knew that his great priest was not a man whose counsel was to be gainsaid, and he pulled together all his army, his many bronzed warriors, and they went up the Nile, and caught the sea people, where Kusu said they would be, there at the eastern end of the delta, caught by the changing wind, in a camp ill prepared for the sudden onslaught. But Kusu looked in all the tents, and in all the tents of the sea people, one by one, he picked up some old dusty treasure. And the Pharaoh at last said to him, "Bring it to me." And Kusu said, "No. I must take the dead back their own." And he looked at Ramesses with eyes that seemed to be older than time, profounder than despair. And Ramesses took a step back, and Kusu strode off to the south, and there he went by which ways no men quite followed, coming at last through a low door into an empty tomb, where all there was a heap of bones. And then he laid the bones again on the sarcophagus, and heaped up all the grave goods, and coming out with a great charm to Osiris, moved the stone forward, so that the tomb was resealed for all of time. And when he came back, he said to Ramesses, "Remember well, the curse of Set and Osiris lies on those who ransacked tombs, and on all their heirs, until till their goods be back where they should be." And Ramesses published a decree that all must guard the tombs as if they were their own houses. And so, for a long time, while that people lasted in Egypt, men respected the dead and their goods, knowing always that one day people would come and ransack the tombs, and then that old curse by which the sun burns yellow and hot, by which war and plague come, would bite, and bite hard. Such is the story as I heard it. and whether it is true or no, and whether the curse lies upon the land that keeps the possessions that are not their own. I think I shall let you judge for yourself.